My wife has cheated on me more than a dozen times, took my kids, house, dog, tried to have me arrested and killed. This is my story thus far. Names have been changed for legal reasons. Elizabeth and I met on a site called hotornot.com in 2003. We officially met on Saturday, January 24, 2004. By February 13, we're dating. Several weeks later I got notice of deployment overseas. Elizabeth wasn't thrilled. While away during the deployment, I got letters weekly. We also spoke on the phone daily. This was the woman I was destined to be with as far as I was concerned, since my previous fiancée, Leah, wasn't ready and I thought I was. I came home on leave and she picked me up wearing a dress. First time I had seen her in a dress. She was a sight to behold. I returned to my deployed unit and conversations continued regularly. The last 4 months of the deployment I told her I did not want to return to my previous home. I sent her money to find me an apartment and told her she could stay in it until I returned or move in with me. She jumped at the chance of not living with her mom. There were hints of jealousy and questioning my loyalty every time my phone went off or I got on the internet for 2 to 3 years, but life was good otherwise. We found a bigger place to live as we were expanding. Blaming me of cheating continued, yet I've been faithful. I told her if she continued blaming me for something I hadn't done, I would. She continued and I did once, then again with an old friend and previous love interest that wanted to. She hacked my laptop while I was at work and posted on my Facebook and contacted people she assumed I was messing with. I hadn't told her I had done anything yet. My friend Jen called me to let me know what was up on Facebook. We had a blowout and she told me to leave. I packed my stuff and put it in storage, and took off. She called me while I was on the highway heading to Mom's, said something that led me to believe she would harm herself. I turned around. When I got there were cops waiting for me. Her friend, we'll call Ashley, married a cop and cheated on him with another cop, told the cops there was a domestic issue. Cops waited for me in my driveway. Questioned me and left after realizing she had no marks, I wasn't home, I have never been violent with a woman, and with no history of violence either. If anything, she's the violent one. Elizabeth and I talked and I apologized. I promised change, and started with my phone number. I left nearly everyone I knew, except for family behind. We made up. Since then I swore to never put her through that and kept my word. After my daughter was born in 06, she gained weight and became more of a workaholic than ever. We had arguments about little things. She would refuse to ever do dishes, and since I was the cook, I thought it was only fair. Dishes got so bad that she actually would throw away dishes, pots, pans, etc., because she refused to wash them. It was beneath her. We had more sex, a child, and life had normalized, with the biggest difference is my phone no longer rang. At all. I didn't even go see my mother or family without her. When I did, my phone went off every hour or two. I had to go to Iraq on deployment in 08. She came to see me just before shipping out at my training center in Texas/New Mexico. I was glad to see her and our daughter. I shipped out and went to Iraq while she was in school with a 2-year-old. I sent her money to cover rent for the entire year in one shot. She would leave me messages of my little girl on voicemail if I couldn't call while they were awake. She was in nursing school and graduating in January. I was supposed to make it home for Christmas, but Snow had other plans. I called a friend to pick me up at the airport on December 26 when I landed. I went home and no one was there, so I sat on the couch in the dark until they came home. I think I surprised her a little bit because all I heard was, "You fucking asshole," when I said hello as she walked into the dark living room. I was home for her graduation from nursing school. She is still gaining weight, but I would never tell her anything about it. I returned to the Middle East and got injured again. This time, more seriously than the previous one. It actually ended my military career with a medical discharge. Soon after I got out, we talked and arrived at the conclusion that we would have a better chance at getting a house if we were married. We married soon after. We stayed with a new mutual friend, whom we'll call Annie, until we found the house we could buy. We stayed with Annie for about 3 months and we bought a place 4 blocks away from her. Annie and her family were amazingly hospitable people. I spent 5 years with the military and the VA trying to assess the damages I incurred and how to fix it. As you might not be surprised to hear, not much was done and never got the same diagnosis twice. I ended up at a sports medicine doctor that figured out the problem and solution in just 2 visits. The sex was more sporadic now, she had gained more weight and had mood swings. I honestly think the drop in sex was on me, but I also didn't want to have sex while angry with someone who was making me angry with attitude and mood swings. Her temper would escalate and I was the first person she'd see and the one she'd blow on when she got home. She expected me to help clean the house more often, and when I did, she would find something that wasn't clean to go off on. If I wasn't with the kid or working, I'd retreat to my PlayStation. We used to play together, but two-player games that we'd both be interested in were no longer the norm. Even heading to the range with me was no longer a couple's activity. She'd either complain about her back or being tired. PlayStation became my escape from the physical and emotional pain. She doesn't say please or thank you to me, no, have a nice day at work or in general. I wasn't happy with how I was treated. My oldest kid noticed it and voiced it a few years later. My input was often treated as an opinion, so I didn't volunteer it anymore, even if asked for it. Still, I'd never consider abandoning my family, my kid or my wife. I also gained weight since the injury, but I never hit 200 pounds. By 2021, she had hit nearly 260. In 2018, my job left the state. My sex life with my wife was dying down. My wife didn't say much, but she has never at this point really said no to sex unless she was on her cycle, and even then she warned it would get messy. Still, we went at it. Sometimes she'd say, "Your wife is horny," which I naturally complied with. She did straddle me on occasion while I was on the couch playing or watching TV. A hint hard to ignore. She worked a lot. So much so that she rarely attended the sporting events she signed our kid for. I have never missed one. The kid noticed and I was her favorite. Mom was more of a financial backer at this point. By the kid's love. I wasn't entirely broke, I still managed to pay every bill I had, but coming from a third world country and raised by my mother, I do not buy love. I was there. We did have a second girl in 2014. Her career now allowed her to make double what I was making easily, but she was working a lot. 70 hours wasn't out of the ordinary. We did not have shared accounts. I've never been into money like that and I've never asked her for any either. Our money would pool up for the house, the kids or vacations. She is a spender. I redid the house's bathrooms, floors, sinks, vanities, furniture and even fixed a contractor's screw-up. We even redid the kitchen in its entirety. I took pride in the manual labor and what I put into it. I still haven't heard a thank you or a praise for my hand in it. Communication was now poorer. I loved this woman, so I wasn't going to give up. We did have a talk in which we addressed concerns. We agreed to make changes. I made changes. I wouldn't even turn on my PlayStation during the week if she was home. I would come to bed with her earlier, etc. Weeks go by and I notice I am the only one making changes. When I confronted her, she said she didn't believe my changes were permanent, so she wasn't going to try. That was my fuck it moment. I turned on the PlayStation. Sex also suffered. She would rarely if ever say no, but would complain if I asked her to switch into positions where she would have to put in work. Her back was the reason every time. For some time, we weren't seeing each other much outside of dinner time because of our schedules. If I wasn't working, I was at home with the kids or at whatever sporting activity/school related activity they were scheduled for. She was either asleep, at work, or at some lunch with friends. I'd tell her that her daughter is upset that she's not coming to any of her games, to which she would sometimes get up and come to, but if the child lit up and asked if she was coming, Elizabeth would get irritated and yell that maybe she wouldn't come. That would naturally make my child run to her room to cry. That pissed me off and I let her know she was being a bitch and got in between to absorb any outburst coming towards the kid. Despite it all, I considered my wife to be my best friend. I would call her for anything I would call a friend for. I liked hearing her voice. I'd call her even for hypothetical dumb questions, which she was less amused by as time went on. She would sometimes tell me about her day. She'd think I wasn't listening, so I had to summarize back to her what she had just told me. I valued her opinion, especially about the house or kids. Even if mine wasn't valued. My wife was my son, although in hindsight, I didn't say it much. 2021, my wife's 90-something grandmother's health declines yet again and she has to get a medical procedure. Procedure does not go as planned and who went in wasn't who came out. Her children weren't up to the task of taking their mother in, so my wife's career as a nurse made her uniquely qualified to deal with her and had to volunteer to take her in. Pressure was on her, until I realized, the pressure was actually on me. My wife still works a lot, COVID hits and I'm now home. Every day. My oldest daughter pinched in a lot more than I expected her to. A lot more than her great-grandmother's 4 grown, 50-plus-year-old children. I ended up hosting physical therapists, taking her up and down our flight of stairs, medical appointments for dialyses, feeding and entertaining her. This old woman would make up stories when Elizabeth got home. One would be that I was talking to someone about taking my kids away in an airplane. A more disturbing one was that I was molesting my oldest child. That did not go well with me, and when we told our daughter, she wound up crying and wouldn't talk to her great-grandmother for a bit. I stayed away as well. The great-grandmother would also oppose punishments of the kids. Elizabeth got angry and told her if she thought she could have a say in her parenting, that she needed to leave. At the 6 months mark, she got into a blowout with her about parenting, so my Elizabeth called her eldest aunt and told her to come get her mother. My wife was still in charge of all medical-related things, as well as her finances, which included selling her grandmother's place. Summer 2021, my wife tells me she wants to get weight reduction surgery. It's a surgery, so I'm petrified. She wanted me to not return to work until she had recovered from surgery, and I agreed. 2 weeks after she recovered, she was angry that I hadn't returned to work. I did find a job that was not exactly safe. I had some minor injuries, noise level exceeded 96 dB for the entirety of the 10-hour day, and told my wife. To her, it was me, complaining. That took me by surprise. My wife would now be going to the gym every day, her dietary requirements changed and I wasn't keeping up with it. She would buy large quantities of meals suited for her new diet, fill the refrigerator with it and leave little room for me and the 2 kids. By this point, my wife lost about 80 pounds. She looks almost as good as when we began dating. I asked her what she thought about how people see her now and she began to cry and said it was fucked up. She gets so much attention now and the people that didn't acknowledge her last year or prior, now do. I would occasionally hear her crying in the bedroom, so I'd go ask what's wrong. She'd say nothing and tell me to get out. I'd get out and come back later and ask again. She'd yell to get out. I'd get frustrated and angry because I can't figure out why my wife is crying and she won't tell me. She'd see I'm angry and then think that I'm angry because she's crying, not because I was frustrated that I didn't know why she's crying. I knew she had a lot going on, but she's not the talkative type. At least with me anymore. She's been dealing with her own health, her grandmother's, her family's BS. She was touched by her mother's BF when she was younger. Her ex-boyfriend, before me, calls her with extreme frequency the last 15 years. She brushes him off or turns off the ringer. It struck me odd that she wouldn't just block him. I told her to let me pick up when he calls, and she refused. When we began dating, she confided in me that she was damaged goods because of him. This woman had the audacity to tell me she wanted to bring her ex-BF's 17-year-old son to stay with us for a few days as he was from a broken home. I wasn't happy about it, but I didn't say no. He was respectful and well-mannered. We even hung out. Junior was involved in a drive-by shooting where he wasn't the target, he was the one jumping to save someone and got killed instead. She took that hard. Somehow, no one would tell his imprisoned father and somehow, it fell on her to break the news. Not his mother, not the kid's mother, not the grandmother, my wife. She drove with his other son, wasn't his, for 16 hours or so, across 6 states, to go see him in jail. I had no say and neither did the fact that she's a wife and mother. Not only did she go see him, but it turns out that she's also the only contact his lawyer has, but that she also manages his JPay account and money in jail. I'm not happy. She had a video call at her mother's house from him on Thanksgiving night 2021 and introduced him to everyone, but me. My anger meant nothing and I'm being looked at by few of the family members like WTF? I switched jobs to another one in a field I was more comfortable with and paid the same. I lasted 2 days there before being fired because the vice president asked my trainer what he thought of me and he said that my previous job in the same field that was in a union. All she heard was union? I struggled to figure out how to tell my wife, so I spent an hour and a half on the phone sorting out what happened. I got home and told her and she wasn't pleased. I got another job a couple of weeks later. A couple of weeks after that, I got a second job offer and interview. I returned home confident because not only did I know the manager and worked at a previous company in the same field as him before, but he gave me every vibe I got the job. Wife is waiting in bed and I told her about it and all she said was, "We need to live in separate houses." Yeah. That just happened. My world stopped. We need to separate and reassess where we are. By the time I registered what just happened, I asked her if this was a means to a divorce. The one word she told me and I agreed on the day we started dating was not something we believed in. Divorce. She replied with only one word. Eventually. My heart literally felt like it stopped. Like it fell and I'm watching it shatter on the floor. I forgot how to breathe. When conversations resumed, she began crying and said she knew she would have to pay me alimony. That she feared the oldest would want to come with me. I told her I've never asked her for money and I wasn't going to start now. Also that I had no intention of ever separating my kids from their mother. I told her if we had to be apart to mend our marriage, I'd comply. She said it won't help. I asked her why. Why didn't she want to even talk to a marriage counselor? She said she didn't think it would help and she didn't want to pay for it. I asked her if that was the price of our marriage. The cost of a therapist. She knew I would max out any card to get our marriage on track. She declined. We agreed on not ruining the kids' Christmas 2 weeks away, we'd tell them after. She no longer wears her ring. I realized that I was losing my family, so I tried anything that came to mind to get close to her, to do things she wanted, anything. The sex went from mediocre to incredible, but it was just sex to her. Nothing more. She would even now participate. Come few days after Christmas, and she decides it's time to tell them. We all sat on the couch, me holding back tears. She tells them that we agreed to separate. My oldest is in shock, the little one was not yet sure what that meant. Oldest asks if this was going to be a divorce. Mom said yes. I said nothing. Tears ran down my oldest, and the last words she said that night was, "This place is going to feel so empty." I broke. That killed me and every ounce of restraint I had. All I could do was to hold my firstborn while the little one was catching up. Tears. Everywhere. The day after that, it was like a switch went off in my wife's head. She was turned off. Cold. Distant. I called a lot, I questioned a lot, I texted a lot. Which she later used as the basis for a restraining order. The last 2 weeks there were hints that we could work, but when she caught herself, she would go cold, angry, then cry. She was angry at herself for feeling. When I did something I knew she liked or wanted, she'd cry and say, "Why now?" Sex was no longer as frequent. She withdrew, but when it happened it was amazing, but it was just sex. No emotions. I was given every indication to press on, to include the words, "Shut up and fuck me," but again, it was just sex to her. January 2022, we get the first snowstorm of the year. We went to bed, had sex, she got up soon after and left. During a snowstorm. She would leave with extreme frequency. As early as 6 p.m. and not return till 3 to 7 a.m. the next day. She drove to a town 30 minutes away each time. She met someone on a dating site, BLK, and went to meet him on a dare the very next day. When not at work, she spent countless nights with this new guy. Let's call him Trayvon. I was beside myself. January 11th, I asked her to go out on a date with me the next day so we could talk and spend time together. She told me she had to go see her friend Christina, who had a heart problem. The 12th, she got her nails done and went to Trayvon's apartment. I was paying for her phone at the time, so I tracked it to his address. I confronted her after looking up his number, name and address. She was getting angry and lying. I thought my wife wasn't a liar. I turned out to be wrong on that. I badgered her asking if she had fucked him. She told me, no, he's just a friend and he didn't have his shit together or even a license to drive. She was lying to my face. She developed a tell that I hadn't seen prior. She was having sex with both of us. She began blocking my number when she went out. I went to great lengths to find the truth and to find out my wife was a liar. I went out to dinner with a friend without my wife for the first time in over 15 years. She left for Trayvon again. Left the kids at home. I'm talking to my friend about what's going on and airing my frustrations. I got a call from my little one that her mother wasn't picking up the phone, which was extremely rare. I ended dinner with a friend and went home. I called and was blocked. I used a burner app to generate a new number and called her. She picked up and hung up when she realized it was me. I was livid. She of course lied again. He's just a friend. This woman took off to see him because he was sick. She's known this guy for less than 3 weeks. Sometime near the 20th of January, she slept on our bed for the first time this year. With me. I hugged her and snuggled up to her. She still had her smartwatch on and when it touched my nose, it lit up and a message was on it. Conversations with another guy that married women just don't have. I scrolled and saw the words, crave you and wanted to cuddle and kiss you. I asked her later on if she loved him or had sex with him. Naturally, she said no. I didn't mention yet having seen the messages or the one where she wanted to lay on him. I showed her screenshots and photos I've taken since and she admitted to being with him but that she didn't have sex. That was a lie. I asked her about other numbers I had found and she identified her personal trainer and that he tried to kiss her but she refused, even though she's had over 500 texts with her personal trainer the last month, and more ongoing. This woman had left our bed, even after sex and during snowstorms to be with this guy. She had over 2,000 texts back and forth in the first 10 days of meeting him. My life was crumbling. I loved this woman no less than I loved breathing. She didn't care. She'd come home with either different clothes, in pajamas, or with no panties on. She wanted to refinance the house to her name because, since I had just started a new job, it would make it hard to refinance under both our names and I was moving out. Her plan was to refinance, get money out of it and give me a small portion to help me move and refurnish. She would pay off debt. I signed it. I told her about my concerns of her selling the house without me and bailing. She said she'd never do that. I still have the texts. This woman had the audacity to bring this man's clothes and underwear to our house to wash before I left. She saw no big deal, just helping a friend. Nothing at all fucked up or disrespectful. I moved out on the last day of January. This woman was packing me weeks earlier. My clothes were no longer being put in a dresser, they were folded in a tote on the floor. February 2nd I go back to our marital home and pick up my firearms. I tell her I'm considering leaving one with her for protection. To gauge if she remembered how to use one, I unloaded one and handed it to her. She didn't clear it, she just pointed it at my head, squeezed the trigger and said bang. I snatched it from her, put the magazine in front of her and asked her, "Is this what you want?" as I gave the gun back to her. She got angry and told me to put it away. The night didn't improve. By the time I got home, she told me she had filed for divorce that day. I called her back on video and questioned her sanity. I asked her while bringing the same gun she had to my head in view, not pointing at myself, and told her, "Why don't you just kill me? Save yourself the paperwork and just shoot me. I'll even show you how." She said, "I'd never hurt you," and hung up. Had our mutual friend, Annie, call me. I told her everything was fine, but I really wanted to end my life. I didn't want to do it myself, but had little to look forward to. It occurred to me that it was February. There's always been a thing with my family dying in the month of February for the last 45 years. I still had 2 daughters. I'm breaking that cycle. I put the gun away and didn't touch it again for some time. Up to this point, I had some dark thoughts and desires, but I have kids. 2 days later, I returned to our marital home and picked up the kids for the weekend. She had them packed and everything. Previous 2 days apparently didn't happen. Turns out, she had plans. She brought Trayvon home. Fucked him in our bed while the kids were with me. I wouldn't know this till later. Fast forward a week and we had to take one of our dogs to the vet to get a quality of life assessment. The following week, we had to put her to sleep. My oldest daughter, my wife and the dog were at the vet for her final moments. It was hard. We were all in tears. This was the 3rd dog we'd lost in 18 years. I'm holding my daughter and wife. Everyone in tears, meanwhile she's texting Trayvon during this with her right hand. At the vet. In front of our now dead dog. She continued texting him in the car and the rest of the day. Even after telling her I saw it. Hell, I was holding her left hand while she texted him with her right. In the car. Driving back from the vet. We went back to our marital home to break the news to the little one once she got home from school, and as usual, Elizabeth's plan to distract the kids from the hardship was shopping. So to the mall we went. She went right for Victoria's Secret. Her new favorite store. I went up to her and whispered in her ear that I would pay for up to $400 of anything she was buying if I got to take it off her with my teeth. She declined and racked up $700 plus for her and my 15-year-old. That night, she tells me she wants me to pick up the little one and take her to the school bus in the morning. I was to drive 30 minutes away from my place and away from work, to our marital home to pick up my kid, to walk her 150 yards to the bus stop, because she had a work meeting and preferred I did not enter the house. I showed up the next morning and she brought the kid to the door. As we walked outside, the 7-year-old tells me, "Mommy's friend is in your side of the bed. Not 2 weeks and he's on my fucking pillow. She's brought him to our fucking home and to our kids." I ran back to the door and hit that Ring doorbell rapidly. She opened and was about to slam the door, but I put my foot in the way and asked her if he was inside. She wouldn't give me an answer, but gave me the tell she was lying. I said she lied to me and left. Took the kid to the bus and returned. She wouldn't open the door and we yelled through the door. Her that she's gonna call the cops and me that she lied to me. I left seconds later and we continued fighting via phone and text all day. I got in touch with a friend and told her if she wanted I would fly to her state for the weekend and to clear her schedule. By the time a decision was made, it was too late to make the flight, so by 5 p.m. I decided I couldn't stay home in my own head, so I drove to IKEA to pick up furniture. While there, the back and forth continues. I demand she tells me every lie and how many times she's fucked him and if she fucked us both on the same day. She responded with, "Not now," taking him to his house, with my kids in the car. They even stopped to eat on the way. She said, "Oh well, shit happens." She fucked him 4 times as of then, low number, and that she hadn't fucked us both on the same day, another lie. She threatened to call the police and have me committed for sounding crazy. She blocked me again after that and I went home to build my furniture. Ring alert goes off, I look at the phone and it's 4 cops in ballistic gear and body armor at my door. She went to the police and told them that I was homicidal and suicidal, that I had several firearms, and wanted a restraining order against me to protect her and the kids. That she was concerned for my well-being. Every line she needed to get me red flagged. 10 days after she had a gun to my head and 8 days after she sent my kids to be with me for the weekend so she could fuck a man in our bed. She was concerned, but only after I had the kids for the weekend and almost 2 weeks later. They did not arrest me but strongly advised me I should come with them to talk to a doctor voluntarily and that I'd be home by morning. I invited them inside to see I was literally building shit in my house. They refused to. I agreed to go. They held me in place and returned with a warrant to confiscate my firearms. I realized very quickly I was no longer there voluntarily. I told my oldest via text her mother was taking her away from me, and that was the last word I had with her in 10 months so far. I ended up in a behavioral hospital, just as she had planned. I had now lost my wife, my kids, my house, my guns, my freedom, my time, and almost both jobs. I was there for 11 days before they let me out and strongly suggested counseling. I got a court date in which everything I had asked Elizabeth's sister for help with in confidence was coming out of Elizabeth's mouth with her own twists. The fact that the man she had brought to my kids, Trayvon, was a violent felon with over 14 charges which included aggravated assault, battery, assaulting a police officer, hiring a minor to commit a crime, several theft charges and breaking restraining order didn't faze her or the judge. I was in shock and failed to say anything to defend myself. The judge sided with her, as is common, disregarded my pleas that Elizabeth was evil, said that it didn't matter if she messed around. I was to stay away from my wife and kids until further notice and counseling. The whole thing was on Zoom, and the smirk on Elizabeth's face when I asked her if she knew what she was doing was a life sentence. I wanted that video. That video would prove she enjoyed it, but court doesn't release Zoom videos. Just before the end I stated that Elizabeth would turn the kids against me, to which the judge told her verbally to not do that. That same day my wife told my oldest one that I didn't love them nor did I cry for them, just my guns. At the end of the court session, I noticed my heart rate was at nearly 4 times my normal resting rate, mid to high 50s, at 193 beats per minute while sitting down with the computer in front of me. I knew it was high but didn't register that I was having a tachycardic event, which I was told later was due to broken heart syndrome. Yeah. That's a thing. Who knew? In March, I'm getting calls from school that my oldest wasn't at school. I called Annie to ask her if my kids were okay. I told her I'm not asking about Elizabeth, just needed to know my kids were okay. I had a gut feeling something was off. She lied and assured me the kids were fine. Weeks later, Annie confesses that my oldest one suffered a head concussion during a sporting event and that she pleaded with my wife to tell me, which still hasn't happened. Conversations with Annie ended up being less than fruitful as she was saying something to my wife and she assumed I was breaking a restraining order asking about her or willfully lied. Again. My wife was using Annie to either get messages to me and make requests, which I thought was against the restraining order. She would reach out to ask for passwords or to extend the little one's time on her tablet so her and the cousin could talk and play longer, but not to tell me my kid's been in the hospital with head trauma and kept from all sporting events until otherwise cleared. One occasion, Annie reached out to ask for a password. I told Annie I was angry because my wife's boyfriend, Trayvon, was video calling my 15-year-old at 2 a.m. My wife had changed all of the kids' phones, emails, numbers and accounts, then returned the old phones that she put under my name on my account back to me. None of them had been wiped, so synced accounts were pinging all connected devices. Annie asked me if I wanted her to investigate that and when it happened. I told her when, but that I couldn't tell her or ask her to investigate anything as it violates the restraining order. She said okay, I'll ask Elizabeth. She called me back minutes later and stated that my wife knew about that and that they were all together at the time. They went down to get something and they called her to see what she wanted. Why didn't my wife call her own daughter and ask herself from her own phone? There. No downstairs to get food anywhere in the vicinity of our marital home or his. That only implies they went away for the weekend again, and Annie said they were away. All 4 of them. That's the 3rd vacation my wife and kids with her new boyfriend had been to this year so far. I told Annie my wife is leaving my kids alone at night when she goes to work, and Annie let out that she wasn't. My wife's mother and sisters, Annie, as well as the new boyfriend, the felon, were taking turns. I had been in that family for 17 years so far, so I knew the circumstances. My wife's mother has no patience for kids and their bedtime routines. Her sisters would only sporadically want to stay at our marital home to watch my kids when their own lives weren't suitable to leave unattended, and later text messages confirmed Annie wasn't staying either. She was there long enough to tell them to go to bed and then leave, only to text them in the morning to let her know when they woke up. Essentially, my kids were alone every night when there is a known child pornography fiend within 100 yards from our front door. Annie essentially, and either out of guilt or not realizing it, was keeping me informed but was also saying something to Elizabeth. The letters in the mail from the court with court dates told me so when Elizabeth complained that I was stalking them due to what I knew. I was the one who put my kids to bed every single night since their birth. I knew routines and it was easy to put things together based on what Annie told me. I lost about 8 days of work in the last several months going to court only to have it postponed due to lack of discovery, and the police told her they couldn't find evidence that I was doing anything wrong. She even complained when I would erroneously add calendar entries to the family calendar of my daily activities, twice, that it was me communicating with her, but she did it 3x with her own doctor's appointments as well as the kids' appointments up until 2023. I went to court like 8 times, which required a lawyer, which cost me a total of $5,000 that I still don't have. My wife arrived at the court with her middle sister and Annie, both of whom I later found out my wife had subpoenaed into joining her, as well as 133 pages of her own discovery. I looked at every page in detail. They were notes and complaints about the police department telling her they couldn't find what she said as well as screenshots of husband and wife arguing. In 18 years, there have been 0 threats, implied words, gestures, motions, intent or anything from my end towards her. She put my own gun to my head. I responded to every page and even provided proof in the form of screenshots and common sense. I gave them to my lawyer and we went to court, yet again. Within 20 seconds of the judge reviewing my wife's hand-selected discovery, she told the prosecutor she couldn't use any of that stuff after a certain date. Then the judge asked the prosecution what they wanted. He stated they wanted to put me in jail for 90 days, to which the judge said, "I'm not doing that." The prosecutor then tried jail for 30 days, to which the judge also turned down. She said she would change the charge to disturbing the peace, talked to me as if I was a child, told me not to mention my wife's name on any social media, which I still haven't, and that I would be fined up to $800, which I don't have. The judge never read my responses to anything my wife alleged I did. I never went back to our marital home to stalk or spy, Annie was telling me, the rest I figured out. Living with someone for 18 years lets you know that someone. At least I thought it did. I got shafted. Again. Not one soul that could hear me and make a difference in the way things were turning out, and Annie still hasn't told my wife. She's the reason I knew the shit I couldn't put together myself and that I have never been back to that house to stalk her or my kids. I'm almost $18,000 into this divorce that I had to take loans for. I don't exactly make enough to pay for my rent, living arrangements, and 1 loan, yet I'm forced to figure out how to pay for rent and 2 loans, as well as court fees, living expenses, and repairs to my car, which exceeded $3,300 this time, not including the stuff I could do myself and another issue that requires pulling the transmission. She made more than double what I'm making now last year. I didn't want to fight her and couldn't afford to until May of 2022, when I took the first loan. I never thought she'd go as far as she has. Knowing I live paycheck to paycheck now that I have to pay for rent when our mortgage was half that, and she had no trouble attempting to send me to jail, essentially taking my livelihood and freedom again, further alienating me from my kids, and making me homeless so she gets the upper hand and keeps the house. I woke up to a message from one of Elizabeth's friends. Let's call her Diana. Diana was pissed off at Elizabeth and told me everything I knew and everything I didn't. My wife hasn't been with 4 guys, it was closer to 25 of them, and Diana sent me screenshots of her bragging about the sex and naming the guys, as well as making arrangements to meet new ones. So many that she refers to them by their respective cities, and not their names. My wife is a whore and a sugar mama. She's having sex in her car in parking lots with men she met on the BLK app and on Facebook, as well as their friends and the gym. She's been romantically involved with upwards of 16 men in the last year. That includes her best friend's boss, behind Annie's back, whom Annie is also apparently sexually involved with. Telling Annie's husband was rough, but I couldn't let him go through my pain. He's a good person. My wife, so far, has slept with her personal trainer, the window tint guy, a construction worker, several convicts, several married men, one of which is a lawyer, a coworker, and at least one is in jail. The current boyfriend, Trayvon, is a convict and she's cheated on him with his cousin, and he has cheated on her with another woman while in Elizabeth's truck, which he's not supposed to be driving without a license. This woman has been to many hotels in Atlantic City with Annie and many men she Ubered over. She's also paid for their tattoos and their phones. She's holding my kids hostage and even turned one against me. The one she knew loved me more and was coming with me after high school. Even though she was told not to. I truly did love that woman. Part of me still does, but she will never be trusted again, and when my kids are of age, this story with all the details left out and all of the evidence to prove it, will be theirs. I just gotta make it that long, since she asked Diana to have her ex-boyfriends kill me and she'd compensate them. Diana refused and told me instead and sent me over 80 screenshots of the last 2 years. I have since put in place a poison pill of sorts so if when something happens to me, it all comes out. I am alone, I am broken, defenseless, and I am suffering some bouts of depression while keeping a smile to the rest of the world. I can't afford this fight much longer and my resources are slim and getting slimmer. I keep going for my kids even if one of them now shares her mother's hatred for me without ever having heard the truth because the judge sided with my wife without hearing a single sentence I've said, to include that she put a gun to my head. The judge still ordered the kids not be told a single word of why our family is no more. I keep going with the encouragement of 3 friends and the kindest and wisest words of an ex-girlfriend, Leah, that should have never been my ex. Hopefully someday that will be rectified. Someday, this story will be heard and read by others with the real names in place, and that includes her family. Whether via a FOIA request of the court documents or directly from me. Repercussions be damned. Meanwhile, thoughts? What do I do?